What's up everyone and welcome back to Reload Reacts episode 75. My name is Trey and today we are going to look through r/MaliciousCompliance, the subreddit for those who are technically following all of their given directions, but not the spirit of what they actually mean. This first post is by The Floor is Benny Lava. Turn my service off right now! Okay. I work for a major cable internet TV and home phone provider, the one that is probably the most hated. You know the one. The department I work in is responsible for either saving a customer or turning their services off. Call came in transferred from our tech support team, and by this time, the customer was already on the phone for an hour. Tech agent was able to get service back up and running, but he was now asking for a large credit for 1 day of service out. As soon as I got on the phone, it was demands. Here's what you're going to do. If you can't do this, then turn my service off immediately. I no longer want to be a customer. I tried to calmly explain to this very rude man that I could not credit him over $200 for 1 day of service, but would be more than happy to process a credit more appropriate. He declined and again demanded that his service be turned off immediately. I reiterate the immediately part to him and he says, yep, right now. Cue malicious compliance. I turn off all his services right there that very second. He starts screaming that he was watching that, and what am I going to do without internet? I told him that I was only doing what he asked. This ended with me restoring service and giving him a credit appropriate to his 1 day outage, which we figured out was user error on his end. Oh my god, the audacity of people like that. What do the comments have to say? All you did here was prove that you can in fact turn off service without requiring 3 6-hour phone calls to various customer service reps. I was hoping this ended with him using the phone service you provided to call you so his call suddenly cut out. It has happened before and it used to happen so much that they have a hold built into the system that keeps the phone active for half an hour before disconnect. This next post is by Velvet Vanilla Whisper. You have to follow the schedule. Okay. I guess I'll just sit here then. I used to work at a small retail store where the manager was obsessed with sticking to the schedule, like no helping with tasks that weren't written in your official hourly breakdown. Wow, interesting. One day I finished my assigned duties early, stocking a small section and organising a shelf. I saw a coworker struggling with a heavy delivery in the back and offered to help, like any normal human would. Manager saw me and stormed over. What are you doing? That's not your scheduled task. I explained I was just helping out since I was done early. Doesn't matter, follow your schedule exactly. Okay then. So I went back to my area, which was spotless, and just stood there for 2 full hours, staring at the already stocked shelves. Customer asked for help? Sorry, not my department. Boxes were piling up in the back? Not my task. At the end of the shift, the manager gave me a weird look and said, "You didn't do much today." And I just smiled and said, "I was following the schedule exactly like you asked." She never said that again. This next post is by KJWeb8. Start 30 minutes later to save company money? Okay. At one of the factories I worked at, we had a shift overlap. Each shift was there for 8.5 hours with a half an hour unpaid lunch. We had a half an hour on shift change to tell the incoming shift what was going on with the machines. A bean counter figured out how much money could be saved with this unnecessary half-hour handover time being cut. This also cut our workday to 7.5 paid hours. They told the lead men to coordinate the shift handover, even though there was too much information for one person to handle. Cue the malicious compliance. I strolled onto the production floor at my new assigned start time. Machines were all down. Operators wait for me, a setup operator, and a lead man to discuss what needed to be done. Instead of machines running continuously, they were shut down for at least a half an hour. My lead man furiously asked me why I didn't come in earlier. I told him I don't work for free. Naturally, my approach to the new way spread to the other shifts. And suddenly, people who always came in early decided that they didn't want to work for free either. The factory production levels dropped. Upper management asked why. Several fingers were pointed at me for starting the rebellion, but nothing could be done to make us work for free. A week later, our hours were changed back. Every company ever at some point. We had this brilliant idea to save money by not paying our employees for part of their work. Well, yes, that's why wage theft is one of the biggest financial crimes in the world that almost nobody cares about or reports on. This next post is by Billiam201. Don't want to pay 4 guys to not work for 6 hours? Okay. Well, you can pay 30 guys to not work for 6 hours. To make an already long story as short as possible, some background. I'm a manager for a North American railroad, and a lot of our work involves different crafts of employees. Different crafts have different unions and different work rules. The manager of the other crafts and I work together well to get done what we need to get done, especially when some of the work needs to get done at night. The track guys can have a crew assigned to nights, while the signal guys can't. Even better, the signal guys who work overnight have to be let go after 12 hours, and if it's now their regular shift because they came in last night, they get paid the rest of the day to go home and sleep. Track guys have all 3 shifts, but we only have a day shift and an evening shift, but no night shift, because the big hats don't want to hire enough people to do it. Now, the company has decided that paying guys to go home 2 hours early on a Thursday, come in and work overtime all night at 10 PM, and go home at 10 AM, getting another 4 hours pay to go home and sleep, is the ending of all that is good and pure in the universe, and will eventually lead to the collapse of capitalism, the nation, and indeed the universe itself. So they decide that the second shift guys have to stay 4 extra hours, and the first shift guys have to come in 4 hours early. I point out that, 1. I can't force employees to work overtime unless it's an emergency, and the union isn't likely to agree that we want to do this at night so we don't affect traffic is an emergency. 2. Not all employees are qualified on the same things. 3. Since they took half of my trucks away 5 years ago because savings, I don't have enough vehicles for an entire second crew to show up at 2 AM and relieve the guys working in the field so they can go home. The guys currently working will have to stop work, pack up the tools, drive back to the office, let the smaller relief crew load up, drive back out to the work site, do the starting paperwork and briefings and begin the work. And most importantly, 4. That while we aren't there, the track guys can't work, because we have to keep taking things off the rail so the track guys can do their work, and then put them back when the guys are done so we can run the trains in the morning. All of it falls on deaf ears, because the freckle-faced college kid who opens every conversation with "I have an MBA, damn it," who has somehow gotten to a position where he's in charge of the estimates, wants to complain about those 24 hours a night. So after having gone on the meeting record for all of it, I get out of the kid's way. I decide that if my boss isn't going to have my back, I'm not going to stop this inevitable disaster. After all, I have only been doing this for 27 years, but he graduated with a 3.6 GPA from UTEP, so he must know better. So the first night, the job grinds to a halt like clockwork at 1 AM. The second crew shows up at about 4:15 and they get to work. The track folks pack it in, because by the time anything gets dismantled, there won't be enough time to get anything done and put it all back together to start moving trains by 7. Second night, the shift change was a little smoother, so they got out there by 3:45. Managed to get a little work done before packing up. Third and fourth night it rained really hard, so the drive back to the shop and out to the job site took extra time. No work done after the new crew showed up at 4:30. Bright and early Monday morning, we showed up at our morning meeting to find that the track guys got about 30% of the work done that they'd planned for the week, and at this pace, would finish a 6-week job, more than 15 weeks behind, and over budget by more than 300%. Mr. MBA proceeds to launch into his carefully rehearsed speech about key metrics, percent spent versus percent complete, and all sorts of other nonsense. Then he decides to start in on me, since I obviously conspired and colluded with my employees to egregiously erode progress for an entire week. I held up the meeting minutes from the previous week, told him in no uncertain terms that he had asked, in fact demanded, that we have a full shift change in the middle of the track's department work. I looked across the table at him and asked him if he wanted to revise that position. Completely unwilling to let this lowly engineer tell him what to do, he said no, and I was supposed to somehow magically make the shift change faster. Next 3 weeks were the same story. They've now been out there a month and have managed to accomplish just shy of a week and a half of work. Mr. MBA shows up on the site one night, just in time to watch my night guys walk off, watch the track guys shut down the machines and gather outside to smoke, hang out, and generally carouse, because they know they now have 3 hours to screw off and be paid for it. My guys had called me when Mr. MBA showed up, so I get out of bed and get to the job site just in time to see this guy in his shiny fresh from the package safety gear screaming at the top of his lungs to the guys to get back in their department and get the F back to work. They all refuse because they all know that they can't work without us there. Not that they care all that much about our equipment, but because they know Mr. MBA has been throwing a little too much weight around, and nothing makes union employees stick together better or faster than putting the screws to a manager who really needs it. I walk up during a profanity-laced tirade and cut right in and say, "Well, Mr. MBA, I'm sure you're not suggesting that these qualified employees violate Rule X, which clearly states that they shall not under any circumstances run that equipment through a switch that the signal department hasn't checked, would you? That would be a serious violation and could get him in a 30-day suspension without pay. And if you were to suggest he do that, you wouldn't have a union card in your pocket and he would have 30 witnesses that saw you give him that directive, so you wouldn't be suggesting that, would you?" He turned 3 shades of purple, stomped back to his little white company sedan and drove away. He held on to his asinine mid-shift shift change for another 2 weeks until he couldn't hide the massive production delays from his boss anymore, and suddenly, he wasn't in charge of the estimates anymore. The total cost of his little venture? Just over $940,000 over the course of 6 weeks. But he did manage to save $700 a night on those off hours that he didn't have to pay for. Edit. Without doubt, the best part of this post is that I'm up to 11 different railroads being mentioned between the posts and the DMs of guys swearing that this has to be their railroad. This next post is by Rear Engineer. Project manager said if it's a problem, the pressure test will catch it. Alright then, let's find out. Back when I was a junior engineer, I was working with a piping contractor supporting a gas plant project that was in the final stretch before commissioning. We were under intense pressure to hit deadlines, and everyone was feeling the heat. One of my responsibilities was reviewing material before installation, i.e. basic quality control to make sure we weren't about to install something that would bite us later. Then the pipes arrived. These were large diameter, high pressure pipes for a critical gas line, but the moment I saw them, I knew something was off. The mill markings didn't match the material certificates, and some of the weld seams looked rough. When we took a closer look, we found surface defects and laminations at the bevel, classic signs of poor quality steel from a dodgy mill. I flagged it immediately. My lead engineer took one look and agreed. These pipes weren't fit for purpose. We raised it with the project manager, expecting him to do the obvious thing, that is to reject the batch and order replacements from an approved supplier. But this PM wasn't like most project managers. He wasn't an engineer. He had a Bachelor of Commerce and had just landed the job thanks to his uncle, a senior executive. He had zero knowledge and didn't care to learn. To him, just another job to push through quickly to up his bonus, and rejecting the pipes would cause delays, something he was desperate to avoid since it would probably affect his bonus. His response? The supplier says they meet spec, so they meet spec. Just install them and move on. I pushed back, explaining that if these pipes failed under pressure, we were looking at a major incident. He waved me off. Just get it done. If it's a problem, the pressure test will catch it. Alright mate, let's see how that goes. The pipes were installed as is and we moved on to pressure testing. I stood back and watched. As we ramped up the pressure, the pipe's weld seam split wide open and ruptured the pipe. The force of the failure sent a shockwave through the system, and a few of the pipe supports even bent. The pressure test failed, spectacularly. Now instead of a minor delay to replace the pipes before installation, we had a catastrophic failure that shut down work for weeks. The entire line had to be cut out, re-welded and retested. The supplier was blacklisted, and an internal investigation was launched into how the pipes had been approved in the first place. We were also made by the client to bear the cost of rework. As expected, the PM tried to shift the blame, but my lead engineer simply pulled up the email chain where we had clearly raised the defect concerns. Management didn't take long to connect the dots. My PM was taken off the project immediately and was sacked a month later following initial investigation results, and even his uncle couldn't save him. Never saw him again after that, and last I heard, he decided to pursue a career outside of the industry. This next post is by a deleted user. All you can eat. Many years ago, over 20, my wife and I kept a boat at a lake near our home. The marina had a restaurant that had an all-you-can-eat fried catfish on the menu. These catfish were whole and just about the size of a grown man's hand. We had been eating there 3 or 4 times a month for the past 3 years. I held the record of 17 catfish consumed, and Pete, the owner/cook, always said that I was maxed out and could never better my score. Now comes the malicious compliance. Wife and I had 10 family and friends visiting for my birthday, and we all went to the marina for dinner. I boldly and loudly announced that I was going to beat my record of 17 catfish. Obviously Pete overheard my bragging and took our orders. A lot of beer was consumed. Pete brought out 9 platters, turned to me and said, "Beat your record and everything is on the house." With cheers all around, Pete then said, "Fail and you have to give Gail and Debbie a 25% tip." Everyone including me agreed and just knew we were getting a free meal. Pete went back to the kitchen and brought out my first catfish. That sucker weighed 5 pounds. I could not even eat the one. Everyone laughed and we did have a great time. And yes, the girls got their tip and I never messed with Pete again. Pete and I remained friends until he passed away unfortunately last year. He never got tired of telling this story. I think Pete was saving that for a special occasion, man. He knew what was coming. He sensed it. This next post is by a vague, ambiguous name. Boss took credit for my work. Malicious compliance occurred. A few years ago, I was hired as a manager to create the contracts department of a tech startup. My boss was on an opposite coast as me, and we barely spoke. About a year in, the company hired consultants to overhaul departments except for contracts because it was running so smoothly. I was truly proud of this. The company sent me on a paid trip to the Bahamas as a thank you. After I got back from vacation, I asked for a raise to director level. My boss said I just wasn't there. I asked for a list of what I would need to do to be the director. He sent me a list which was everything I was already doing and basically admitted that if I was the director, he would no longer be able to take credit for my work. Friends told me I needed to either leave or put up and shut up. Instead, I chose to kill with kindness. I wholeheartedly apologized to my manager for overstepping and said that I'm going to step back into the manager role. I printed out the manager responsibilities and posted them to my desk. Things went south quicker than I could have imagined. We started missing sales targets. Product said my boss agreed to a term in an agreement that would completely destroy their budget and product rollout. My boss didn't know commission agreements and let sales manipulate contracts, so we were paying commission on contracts with termination clauses. I only interjected once to stop a contract amendment from being approved because my boss was unknowingly letting a VP artificially inflate sales numbers. The controller and CFO had to get involved, and eventually the CEO was called in. Stories started circulating about how my boss holding stress balls and cursing in meetings. I was more relaxed than ever, and during my newfound free time at work I studied for and obtained professional certifications. I would also leave work early to get to the gym before it got busy. About a month after I unloaded my added responsibilities, my boss gave me a 7% bonus. It was unspoken, but I could tell he wanted me to take back on the director responsibilities without the title, but I continued to follow the manager description to a T. 6 months later, after taking 10 days of my unlimited paid time off, I was included in layoffs. Took 3 months off, and then got another job at a 35% salary increase. While I am happy to be making more money, I truly love the company and people I worked with, and it's defeating to watch someone continually take credit for your work. Yeah, that's horrible, man. Some greedy people out there. They just don't know when to quit. This post is by a name I can't pronounce, but it's on the screen right now. You want me to delete my own account in front of you? Okay, done. A bit of background first. 15 years ago, I worked at a gas station as an opener. Because I was young and somewhat tech savvy, I was also the de facto IT for the 3 stores near me, and had been heavily involved in setting up a new point of sale system for their 2 most successful stores when they were swapped from one gas brand to another. The company had made me the super admin on all registers just for ease of transition. Remember this later. The owner's wife had been awful to me for the 2 years that I worked there. I got bumped to opener by her husband, and she hated have a man to be an opener. Historically, every single opener was picked by her and was a woman, but the husband came and fired the previous opener for theft while the 2 of us swapping shifts, so I got a field promotion of sorts. The wife was constantly scrutinizing everything that I did, calling me in the mornings constantly to be rude and berate me for a bunch of minor things I did wrong. You use wet wipes on the area around the drink machine, I want you to use paper towels and spray. We were out of paper towels and the spray we had smelled like a hospital anyway. I came in your store last night and there were 3 rows of Snapple Apple. You could probably increase sales by putting 1 or 2 of those rows to a different product. Even though the Snapple fridge was 100% handled by the vendor and we'd sign a contract that we wouldn't change the layout of the product, etc. Long story short, she was awful to me because I was a dude. I had set up their point of sale systems because I was somewhat tech savvy. I was made super admin on the new registers they had. I was desperately looking for work when I found a temp IT job, which led to my current career in IT. I got a new job offer and gave her husband 2 weeks notice, but never told her because I did my very best to avoid talking to her unless necessary. When she found out it was Tuesday of my last week, she legitimately lost her mind, gave me a ton of stuff to do, and worked me to the bone until 2 PM on the last Friday I worked. Finally, the time to depart forever came, and she personally came with an office worker and stood by me, and she told me to delete my account from the register. I knew I was a super admin, and I had been told if I ever left it to convert the account. She had been told this, but had long forgotten it, so I said to hell with it and complied, then went to the other store and did likewise while she watched. I go about my life, start my new job, and end up about 3 weeks in when I get a frantic voicemail and like 20 texts and calls from her. I called the office worker, who had stood over my shoulder with her, and got the scoop. She basically couldn't change any prices at all when new beer and soda prices started rolling out, and her new opener had just let it all pile up because she didn't know how to do it, and they were going to have someone come train her. They had a bunch of items 5 or 10% below the price they were supposed to be at. Margins on cases of beer are low and this was nuking their profits. Once I thought it was over, I texted her and said, "You asked me to do this, it's on video and we have 3 witnesses. The person she had me training, the person I swapped with, the office worker who had quit in the 2 weeks since." Click. I found out later that they just ended up spending $6,000 to get the company back out to fix the issue. The boss's wife legit had a Facebook page at one point with people planning to S on their grave when she passed one day. And for clarity, she's still alive. So I wasn't the only person she was awful to, but I do feel like I got one up on her and it feels good. Top comment read, "The ability of people to F themselves over is astonishing to me. Excellent malicious compliance." Side note, I never understand why people feel the need to apologize for a long story. I love the long ones. The more meaty, the more better the story in my opinion, but that's just me. And yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I prefer reading the long ones too. It makes it a lot better for me and it's usually a better story that way. And with that, I think that's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed the stories in r/MaliciousCompliance. Let me know what you'd like to listen to next in the comment section below, and also hit that subscribe button because I post new Reddit content every single day. There are 2 videos on the screen, one of which is for the most recent video, and another is for a video the YouTube algorithm thinks you'll want to watch next. My name is Trey, this was Reload Reacts, and I will see you in the next video.